Love or hate the combat in the original Kingdom Hearts, most people can agree that it's at the very least a functioning gameplay system for real-time action. The same cannot be said for its mobile successor, 2005's Kingdom Hearts for Verizon Vcast. The combat is laughable by modern standards. You can move, attack, cast spells, and that's it. No dodging, no blocking, no field items, no combos, no jumping. With the combat system this bare bones, how can you possibly design a satisfying boss fight? The developers of KHVcast had 4 attempts to answer this question, and the results are surprisingly robust. So today, we're going to take a look at what makes the bosses of Kingdom Hearts tick. But here's the thing. Given the lacking state of the combat system, it should come as little surprise when I tell you that combat is limited to only one enemy at a time. If every battle is a one-on-one, then the gap between bosses and normal opponents isn't that big. By understanding the fundamental combat system that the 8 standard enemies present, we can better explore the ways in which the bosses build upon or defy our game knowledge. Plus, a ranking with only 4 bosses would be a bit underwhelming. So let's expand our scope a bit and start ranking every enemy in Kingdom Hearts Vcast. All 12 of them. The award for the worst enemy in Kingdom Hearts Vcast goes to the Air Soldier. It's the most boring enemy encounter in the game, and for Vcast, that's saying something. Let me break down the combat loop. The Air Soldier attacks, then it runs around a bit. That's it. There's absolutely no variation in the enemy behavior other than the direction it chooses to wander between attacks. This simple pattern can be defeated with an even simpler solution. Just attack right before the Air Soldier. Sora's Keyblade Swing will interrupt the Heartless's attack, skipping right to the pointless walking part of the behavior cycle. You can't attack it again until it finishes walking around, since the invulnerability frames in this game are very generous. Then, once the Air Soldier makes its way back, you preempt its attack a second time, and then a third, fourth, and fifth, until the HP bar whittles down to 0. Not only is this combat utterly unengaging, it's going to drag on quite a while since the Air Soldier has the most health out of any standard enemy, over double the next closest competitor. Now, this one-note gameplay loop isn't unique to the Air Soldier, the majority of standard enemies share this basic formula. However, the Air Soldier is unique in its uselessness. This Heartless is the only optional enemy in the game, and it really has no reason to exist. One group of Air Soldiers spawn right before the final boss, but unlike the other 2 mob fights in the same room, they aren't required and can just be skipped over. The only other spawn is in an area you'd have to backtrack to reach. So while the Air Soldier's inclusion is neat, it doesn't really have any impact on the game. To add a boring cherry atop this lame sundae, the Air Soldier only has one attack animation where it just waggles its hands in Sora's general direction. The other enemies that share this brain-dead combat loop at least have the courtesy to mix up their animations, but not the Air Soldier. Put it all together and you have a clear pick for the worst enemy in the game. In terms of gameplay, the Dark Ball is indistinguishable from the Air Soldier. You stand in place and time occasional presses of the attack button when it approaches. It also only has one attack, this time a basic bite technique. But the Dark Ball has 3 legs up on the Air Soldier. 1, it doesn't have an annoyingly large health bar, being only half as sturdy. 2, it has a goofy model that I find endlessly charming. And 3, it's not forgettable. The Dark Ball is the first new enemy you encounter in Maleficent's castle, and its appearance signals that you're entering the endgame. It's a new enemy with a dark color palette, and for those who played the original Kingdom Hearts, the Dark Ball is already associated with the final enemy stronghold. Again, the gameplay is a snooze fest, but the Dark Ball should be proud that it's not the absolute bottom of the barrel. I didn't mean to group all of the Maleficent's castle enemies on the bottom, but I guess they ran out of steam to design opponents by the end of the game, since Maleficent's goon is next on the chopping block. I'm sad to rank it so low, because the fact that it's here at all is incredible. Remember, this game predated Birth by Sleep by half a decade, so there was no enchanted dominion to pull from when designing Maleficent's castle. The designers of KHVcast took inspiration from the original Disney films to create an enemy that fits with the world, when they could have easily copied more KH1 Heartless to fill out the ranks. I want to reward this kind of creativity, but unfortunately these goons annoy me to no end. Like the 2 Heartless below it, the Pig Soldiers follow the standard enemy behavior pattern. But instead of just one attack, the goons choose between 2 different moves. What innovation. Unfortunately for you and me, one of these attacks is, if you'll excuse my language, complete malarkey. If Maleficent's goon attacks with its axe, then you have nothing to worry about, but if it attacks with its rotund body, there's a good chance you'll take damage even if you land a Keyblade Swing. The hitbox lingers for a long time, so Sora's strikes don't have enough range to damage the enemy without getting hit. They're the only enemy where I feel like I'm getting hit when I don't deserve it. You could avoid this by opting for ranged magic attacks, which is literally your only other combat option, but the goon's attacks still feel like a frustrating oversight. Returning to borrowed KH1 Heartless, we have the Bandit. It earns its spot above the other enemies we've discussed by breaking a key expectation we have of VCAST's combat system. See, for most enemies, they spawn into the world when you enter a designated combat zone. When you leave the combat zone, the enemies disappear. This is also true for the Bandit. The thing that differentiates it from other Heartless is that it spawns outside of the combat zone. Whereas other enemies plop into existence out of thin air, the Bandit spawn at the nearest doorway and walk towards the combat zone. Little touches like this add a lot to the game and make the Bandit feel like a special regional encounter. Now, the Bandit still follows the same AI loop that we've been over, but it's not all bad. It has 2 different attacks, one of which involves an entire jumping spin that I'm surprised they bothered to animate. Even if the combat is no different from the 3 enemies that I deemed failures, I have to consider the Bandit the first truly decent enemy on the list. The Mummy is the first enemy exclusive to Kingdom Hearts VCAST. It only appears in the Crypts of Agrabah, and, like with Maleficent's Goon, I'm appreciative of an original design that isn't lifted from KH1. And rejoice, because this enemy breaks the boring attack pattern we've been discussing, replacing the 2-step loop with a 1-step game plan. The Mummy always moves towards Sora and deals contact damage with its outstretched arms. It's simple but effective. Given that this is the first enemy we can't defeat just by standing in place, it has a big lead on the competition. Instead of spawning inside a designated combat zone, the mummies appear via cutscene. The mummy has a second unique attribute too. It can only be damaged by magic attacks. This is one of the only instances where using spells versus Keyblade strikes actually makes a difference. Altogether, this makes the mummy a more memorable encounter than the standard enemies we've discussed. Going 3 for 3 with Agrabah enemies, it's time for our first boss, Jafar. Much like in KH1, Jafar floats between 3 raised platforms and casts ranged magic. Here, he only has 1 attack and easy-to-dodge fireball. The interesting part of the encounter is that Jafar is immune to all sources of damage. However, attacking him will drop 3 random orbs, either HP, MP, or money. The key to the fight is destroying the 3 pedestals that he floats between. They can be broken with physical or magic attacks, but spellcasting deals double damage. I think the fight is interesting because of how it works within the limitations of VCAST's combat controls. They couldn't create an active back and forth with Jafar, so making you dodge his spells while destroying pedestals around the room is a worthwhile attempt at an engaging fight. The attempt still leaves much to be desired, though, since the infrequency of Jafar's attacks makes this encounter too quick and easy. I'm cutting it some slack because this is only the first phase of Agrabah's World End boss, and I enjoy the callback to the KH1 Jafar fight, but it really is a blink and you'll miss it boss battle. The Shadow is next, and yes, the most basic Heartless beats out the Jafar boss fight in being an interesting encounter. The Shadow is unique because, unlike every other enemy in the game, 2 of them can spawn in at once. Now, this is actually just some dev trickery. At all times, one of the shadows is sunken into the floor in an invincible 2-dimensional state, so the game only has to process 1 active enemy at a time. But it successfully gives the feel of fighting multiple enemies, and for VCAST, that's a big deal. The Shadow is the only enemy to appear in multiple worlds, and because it has the same stats from the tutorial all the way to Maleficent's castle, it gives you a sense of progression. Striking down shadows is a constant way to gauge your strength, and by the end of the game, you can eliminate them in 1 super satisfying hit. I'm also giving some extra credit for the invincible shadow encounter at the end of the game, which I spoke about at length last month. The Pot Spider is our highest ranked normal enemy. Its camouflage trick is a failed endeavor, since there are no non-Heartless pots in Agrabah that we might confuse it for, but the fact that the Pot Spider exists in the environment before Sora enters its combat zone is a pretty big deal. If we exit the combat zone without slaying the Heartless, the Pot Spider reverts to its hidden form instead of phasing out of existence like other enemies. Pot Spiders are also the most difficult Heartless to defeat. They approach Sora and attack with a melee strike, and don't get staggered from Sora's attacks in the same way as other enemies. This means that you actually have to focus on your movements to avoid the Pot Spider's attacks, and time your Keyblade swings when it's safe. Chances are you'll take a good number of hits trying to take it down, but unlike Maleficent's Goon, I don't get the feeling that the game is being unfair. Shadow Sora is a fun encounter, even if it's not much of a fight. I'll keep it brief since I spent an entire video talking about this battle, but Shadow Sora mirrors all of the player's movements and attacks. Trying to defeat it with force will only hurt Sora, so the solution is to trick your Shadow into falling down a trapdoor pit. It's satisfying to figure out, and the whole encounter has a unique and unsettling atmosphere. For the first boss fight in the game, it seems like the devs' answer was to not make it a fight at all, but a puzzle, and I think it's a job well done. Coming in at number 3 is the final boss of the game, Dragon Maleficent. This is a legitimate 3D action boss battle, and it mostly works. Maleficent usually attacks with a fireball, but sometimes she'll use the devastating bite attack, the strongest move in the game. This makes her the only enemy who deals different amounts of damage with different attacks. Periodically throughout the battle, Maleficent will disappear and re-emerge on another side of the tower roof. There's a nice moment there where you're scrambling around, wondering what side she'll reappear on. It plays nicely with VCast's limited camera control, making you feel a bit powerless in the moment, but the pacing is generous enough to where I've never been killed by a Maleficent I couldn't see. The encounter suffers from one critical flaw that keeps it from the top spots on the list. Maleficent is immune to physical attacks, but hitting her with the Keyblade will cause 3 random prizes to drop. I understand that you need to have a way to replenish MP if the boss requires magic to defeat, but an infinite source of HP kind of undermines any challenge the battle might have had, and for the final boss you kind of want a bit of a challenge. Cobra Jafar is just a better version of the Maleficent fight. I was underwhelmed by this fight on my first playthrough, but coming back to it, the developers really made the most out of VCast's limited combat system. As should be expected by now, Jafar can only be damaged by magic, and landing a hit drops 3 random orbs. But there's another, more engaging layer to the fight. MP orbs will periodically spawn around the battlefield, but you have to grab them before Jafar attacks. His bite is clearly telegraphed, and when there are no MP orbs on the field, he will target Sora directly. This is a much more interesting setup than the Maleficent battle, and the larger arena also benefits from the partially fixed camera angle. You can rotate around the stage, but the view is always fixed on Cobra Jafar, giving you a sense of scale and allowing you to see the MP orb spawns from far away. Considering the limited tools we have to work with, I think this boss fight really shines through. The Blue Rhapsody is my favorite encounter in the game. I love this fight. Recently, Regular Pack conducted a survey of people's favorite fights in the Cage series, and the VCast's Blue Rhapsody unironically made my top 5. So, what's the deal? If you somehow reach this video without hearing one of my other rants about the Blue Rhapsody, this battle defies all expectations. The Blue Rhapsody is a puzzle mini-boss, infinitely respawning until all 4 braziers around the temple are lit. It will also respawn between each flame you light, meaning a minimum of 4 Blue Rhapsodies will stand in your way. The Blue Rhapsody's unique behavior is to always run away from Sora, but if it runs past a lit flame, it will extinguish it. This leads to an interesting dynamic where you have to chase down the Blue Rhapsody to deal damage, but kite it away from the braziers. Also, just to confuse KH1 fans, the Blue Rhapsody casts fire instead of Blizzard. It was a lot of fun to figure out the gimmick of the fight during my first playthrough, since there were no information bars or online guides to help. I was so confused why the fight wasn't done after lighting 4 braziers, not realizing that the Heartless was extinguishing the ones I had already lit. I will admit that the Blue Rhapsody's propensity to counterattack physical hits with a near undodgeable fire blast is frustrating, but that just goes to encourage magic attacks, and that synergizes well with the Mummy encounter that begins as soon as the Blue Rhapsody fight is over. Of course, you have to be sure to save enough MP to actually light the fires, but even then, the Blue Rhapsody will drop prizes when defeated. If you used a lot of spells and still have full health, it's more likely to drop MP orbs. And if you chose to conserve MP and tanked the counterattacks close up, it's more likely to drop HP orbs. What great design! To take an unnoteworthy facing the crowd Heartless from KH1 and transform it into a bizarre puzzle encounter is a bold move, and it paid off. The Blue Rhapsody fight works within the limitations of VCast's paltry combat to create a memorable and unique challenge that's unlike anything else in the series. Bravo. And with that, our ranking draws to a close. As with the Encounter Spotlight series that preceded, I hope this exploration of Kingdom Hearts VCast battles gives you a greater understanding or appreciation of what this lost game has to offer. We've really dug into the combat in this game over the last 4 entries, so next month we'll return to the game from a different angle. And as always, long live VCast.